don't know if it was exposure to COVID or something with the port in place. So we're going to bring on the GM, Rory Respicio. Good morning, Rory.
Hi, good morning, Chris and Bree.
Good morning.
I guess we'll just give you the floor, and if you could just give us a report on that situation.
Well, I think the post when they talked about my report to the board was based on the payroll memorandum that talked about the differential hazardous pay policy that we implemented. We were keeping track every day. Every division reports to me which employees are out either on sick leave, annual leave, and or whatever their status is. And on the first day that we went into P-Corps 1 that the governor put us in, this island, we had as many as 41 employees just not coming into work. But then that tapered down to where we hovered around 12 to 15 on an average, just people who were sick or... So we started tracking those things. We reported to the board about 38 employees that were either positive or exposed to someone who was positive. And from the very beginning, we remained 100% operational, and we followed the CDC protocol, the public health protocol, that for as long as they're asymptomatic, they're not exhibiting any symptoms, that they're still required to come to work. But these were not people that were positive. Of course, if they were positive, that they would be staying home. They would have to self-quarantine and take those kinds of measures for themselves. But you recall, we also implemented the port clinic, and as of today, we had a little over 14,000 visits, taking temperatures every day. If the employees feel like they need to see a public health nurse to see if they're okay, just to give them the assurances that they are okay and that they should still come to work. I'm not saying that 38 port employees got positive with COVID. I'm saying that they were exposed to someone who tested positive, an immediate family member. But we did have some incidences that never threatened the port's operational capacity at any point.
Rory, can we just go back? So what is it? Is it 38 port employees may have been exposed to COVID-19, or is it 38 tested positive? Or
so 38 who may have been tested positive or who were exposed to someone who tested positive. That number, Chris, was for tracking purposes to demonstrate the level of exposure that the port authority with all the, if you recall, one day when the public health announced that there was some people who at the Holiday Bingo tested positive, I had a staff working at the gate operation system that was called by public health and told you have to self-quarantine. And so the person didn't come to work, and then you had the employees at the gatehouse concerned because that employee may have been exposed. So in following the CDC guidelines, that employee was never tested positive. That employee never had any symptoms of COVID-19. So they should have never been at home even for one day. Because there's certain guidelines for essential and non-essential employees and how to handle the probability if you've been exposed or not. Mm-hmm. And so...
Did you find that these 38, were they mainly in one particular department or division at the port?
No, it was throughout the port. Mm-hmm. It was at the port. Early on, we had about 3 employees that self-quarantined because they came from the Philippines early on. Mm-hmm. But those employees, they didn't test positive. Mm-hmm. It's just when this whole thing came out, just the feeling that people had, oh, my family member tested positive, so I can't come to work. I have to stay home. Mm-hmm. And so when we decided to ask the Governor Lou and Lieutenant Governor Josh and Public Health Director Linda DeNorsi to stand up a port clinic where at least we could have healthcare professionals taking daily temperatures, talking to the employees, assuring them that, no, you don't have a fever, you're not symptomatic, there's no reason why you shouldn't come to work. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, we had 9 hand washing stations. We're doing social distancing, wearing the mask as soon as the mask was required.
Okay.
But you could almost imagine that even someone who felt like they were remotely exposed, they would have wanted to automatically self-quarantine. And if I had allowed them to self-quarantine just to take those an abundance of caution, you can imagine for 368 employees at the port that are required to go to work to keep the port operational, I could have almost had a situation where we wouldn't have the manpower levels to keep the cargo flowing.
Right. So how do you juggle that, Rory, that need to keep the port operating with the need to satisfy your employees' anxiety or their need to mitigate the risk of the spread?
Well, early on, Louis, Dominic, and I'd say around February, we started having general staff meetings, started going around to each division, started talking to them about what we know at that point about coronavirus. I did a memorandum, a directive to all the shippers that the Port Authority employees are not to interact with any of the vessel crew members, and that they only to interact to the agent. We had hand sanitizers early on. Early on, we had the folks on the yard wearing the mask on the yard. Only, to be very cautious about how things are. As things progressed, the concerns were elevated. We just had to keep talking to employees. I remember one afternoon, Louis, Dominic, and I had to go to the one division, finance in particular. They have heard that one of their coworkers came back from the Philippines, and they're at home just to self-quarantine because this person came to work for a couple of days, then was called by public health that that person traveled with to the Philippines tested positive, so this person should stay home and quarantine as well. So you can imagine, right? Oh, I was exposed to so-and-so, I don't want to come to work, I'm very scared because of my family. So I acknowledge all of those concerns, but I also told him that there's no way the port can function if we don't have the capacity to telework. I said, I can't have you guys do billings from your house. I can have you do payroll from your house. It doesn't make sense that the folks on the yard the productivity level is really high, and that they're moving all this cargo. And if there's no one to bill for the work that they're doing, we don't generate the revenue. There's no one to do the payroll. They won't get paid. So they understood. And I even told them I can't even I tried to do a 1/3 man staffing levels on a rotational basis. I tried all those things with all the division heads, and how do we do 1/3 of the people on the yard? How do we do 1/3 from every division? But I told them we have the port clinic. I never made it mandatory because I didn't know what authority I had to say you check in with the port clinic every day. But the good thing about the port employees is I never have to make anything mandatory. All I have to do is explain why we're doing what we're doing and how it's a benefit for them, their families, their coworkers. And the utilization is high, 14,000 visits. We open it up to customs employees, to the tenants. The truckers sometimes just kind of stop on the side of the road. They run into the port clinic, have their temperature checked, they fill out their card, and then they leave. That's what we're doing for all the kind of foot traffic that goes through the port on a daily basis. So right now we're at a level where we're understanding more about the coronavirus. But we're not taking anything for granted. They're washing their hands. The utilization of the hand washing,
my favorite,
it's gone up.
Rory, you were mentioning how there's a high traffic rate over at the Port Authority of Guam. How do you guys ensure that the facilities are adequately disinfected and sanitized?
Yeah, so we're also having our maintenance people. I explained that even our maintenance people are essential because they need to come in. They need to wipe all the, like the staircases. They need to disinfect the employee where they congregate the most. They need to, the desk, the offices, so we're doing that on a daily basis and constantly. And then the employees are also picking up after themselves. They have their own spray bottles and paper towels, and it's just a new normal for us, right? And for the port, the tariff section, the billing section, there's already the plexiglass that's HR always had that plexiglass. So we're lucky in a way that we didn't have to take those provisions for the front-facing customers.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while, we don't have our management meetings, our Monday management meetings face-to-face. They've been submitting their reports to us via email. The port users group, we've been having meetings via teleconference, and we haven't had a board meeting for the last 2 months. We just had our last a board meeting last week. So we adjusted, but
Right.
it never hurt us operationally.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the container throughput, we're only about 0.4% down budgeted. And in terms of revenue, we're actually tracking a net income position of about 5.1 million year to date.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about, like, I was looking at the agenda, the rent deferral. Can you provide an update on that?
So the rent deferral, the governor has asked us to, every division, every department actually, to see what we could do to help the businesses out. We had about 5 tenants that made a request for some kind of rent deferral they couldn't pay. So what I did is I told them that if they can't pay, they can't pay. But whatever policy that will be adopted will have to be adopted by the board. So we presented a program to the board to give them a 6-month rent deferral. But on the 7th month, they pay 100% of the 7th month and half of the first month. So on the 8th month, they pay 100% of the 8th month and the other half of the first month until they're all caught up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so overall, you guys are.
So we're not losing any revenue in the end,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't give any cash breaks in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing we did that the Port Users Group asked us, Bernie and Trey, Matson and APL and Mel Lines, Ed Cruz, they had these, when we went into condition, P-Corp condition 2, there's these containers that were already en route to Guam. And at the time, the retail stores, particularly the bigger ones, were closed. They weren't allowed to open. So they were asking if I could waive the number of free storage days until such time those establishments opened up. So we did. So every company, every person gets 5 free days to get the container out of the port. So I said that the 5 free days will start once we get into P-Corp 4. So what that meant is about $240,000 worth of free storage days that we've extended. But it meant that the containers arrived on Guam, they were stocked out of the port, and as these businesses opened up, that's when the containers were processed out. But that kind of allowed some of the bigger establishments to open without missing a beat because their commodities were already at the port. They didn't have to go and make their orders, and at the same time, they didn't have to have their containers stored at their stores and run the risk of getting it, vandalized.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of creative things that we've been asked to do.
Mm-hmm. What about, have you guys paid out double pay over at the Port Authority?
No, I didn't pay double pay, and I'm grateful to the Port Authority Guam employees for understanding the position that I took early on in March, where I said that if there's any payroll discrepancies, we just have to set that aside until such time we get the guidance and authority to do what is pursuant to the personnel rules and regulations. Then they're hearing that the autonomous agencies implemented it. How come I didn't? And thankfully, you're seeing that even in the Superior Court ruling with Judge Sokola, she's saying that the policy, there's ambiguity. Is Officer Tapasnia saying that he had to work and other officers were an excused absence, or did that mean that other people in the GPD were an excused absence? And then Attorney Fisher is saying that regular employees, that you referenced that to other departments and agencies. So, but the Attorney General's opinion, he went on record saying that he has his opinion based on how he reads the statute would create an inequality or disparity, because the very policy this is designed to compensate those who are working versus those who aren't is not really having that kind of effect. So,
right, but Rory, I mean, what I think is interesting is I know that you this isn't your first rodeo. You've been in the government of Guam. I know you were a fixture in the Gutierrez administration, and we paid out the double pay before, so it kind of seems like you're not really coming down on one side or the other, pending the court ruling. But previously, before this, what was your stance on the double pay?
Well, only Chris, because if I paid the double pay and ultimately there's a decision that the double pay should not have been paid, the employees have to pay that money back. And I don't ever want to put anyone in the situation, even with the differential pay. We were category 3, but with this payroll differential pay policy that we've adopted, what I've decided to do with the governor's support and the board support is to go back from the first week, have each division identify to me all the employees that work and then the risk exposure that they have, and then I will approve all those things. So that's the kind of policy that we developed and how to move forward with that executive order. With the double pay, if it's typhoon, in the past, those double pays were paid, but you've been following the discussion at the legislature that there's some movement to make it a COVID-19 pandemic pay. So there's so much, it's not clear.
Right, yeah.
It's not clear, and if we did the double pay at the port and it's not reimbursable, that would have been a $1.4 million a month impact to the port.
So do you guys have your own differential pay system, Rory, or are you following the executive order?
No, we're following the executive order.
Okay.
Yeah, we are. And that's the authority, because the legislature hasn't, they introduced a bill to memorialize the governor's executive order, and that's still with the legislature. But in the meantime, everybody's following the governor's executive order, which establishes 3 categories.
Right. Okay.
But, the port, they understand, the employees understand, the Port Authority is the front line to also working alongside all the nurses and doctors and the police officers, the firefighters, all the first responders. If the commodities don't come in, if the PPEs don't come in, then those other folks can't do the work that they need to do. And we've been working closely with Joe Cruz with the Port Users Group. They even gave the port a letter of acknowledgement for keeping port operations going, especially during this time. And my bottom line is, I told the employees, do whatever's necessary to keep the port operational. I know that when we come out of this, we want to look back and say we did not miss a beat. We did things like the recertification of the gantry crane and working with Matson as our technical services provider to have those cranes recertified. We did a core relocation project at Hotel Wharf to get our revenue bond funded port modernization projects going. We're applying for grants. Despite the hazardous condition that exists, the employees are still focused on the mission.
All right. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rory. Looks like you guys are holding it down at the port.
We are there. We're port strong.
I was waiting for that.
For those folks.
Hashtag port strong.
Okay.
All right, Rory. Hey, let's make it a habit to get you on every couple weeks. Just give us an update.
Chris, whenever you call me, I'm there.
I know, always. I just forgot to call you. All right, Rory.
Good
thanks.
thing I reminded you.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
So wash your hands.
Bye.
You guys, thanks.
All right. 7:10. Let's keep it on the phones here. We're